Welcome to the Tons of Industry Show. Thank you for tuning in today, as this means you're part of the select few people in today's world who understand that life is a daily educational system. Academia ends at 25 or 30 most, and but in order to be successful, life is to be treated as a classroom each and every day. And I will be speaking today with a returning guest, Bob Moriarty, founder of 321gold.com, about many topics, and it will be an in-depth overview of economic conditions. So I'm glad that you're taking the opportunity to learn, and Bob has made some amazing calls in the past, and we'll retouch on them. Bob, how's August in the south of France?
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful.
I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, and I'm not too far away from you. I'm right now talking to you from Europe as well. I've been spending August in Amsterdam, the Greek island of Corfu, Barcelona, and now I'm finishing off in Ibiza. And tourists are flocking everywhere. It's not just the rich. Young people are on vacation as well, and I'm speaking with many of them who tell me that this is they're doing this on their last dime.
I hate to say it. What you're seeing, I think, is a symptom of what's happening, and it's scary to me. And it's lovely. I mean, we live in a beautiful place, but you couldn't get me to go play tourist in August anywhere in the world.
Sure, and what I'm saying is millennials are worldwide have probably missed the memo that savings is the first step to asset accumulation, because most of them are here spending money on booze, and they're not making any sacrifices to postpone pleasures and make sure that they don't stay like a caged lion for 60 or 70 years in a job that they don't like. But I do want to ask you, are there any indicators on your end as to what is going on right now with the Turkish lira and emerging markets, as opposed to what's happening with the US dollar?
Turkey is very scary to the extent that, bringing Turkey into NATO is kind of foolish. NATO was supposed to offset the Soviet Union, and it stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And to the very best of my knowledge, Turkey doesn't actually have anything to do with the North Atlantic. But Turkey is a part of NATO, which means the United States and the other NATO nations are committed to defending Turkey should they be attacked. But Trump has seized upon the issue of an American preacher to literally beat Erdogan to death. Now, I could tell you flat out, and I was pilot in combat, but I was an intelligence officer too. The preacher almost certainly is CIA. Erdogan accuses the preacher, he's been in jail for 2 years or 3 years, of being part of the coup against Erdogan. And that may or may not be true. Why he would do that if it weren't true is kind of foolish. But I suspect the CIA has told Trump, you either get this guy back or we're going to get really nasty with you. So Trump is literally beating up Turkey, which of course doesn't hurt Erdogan, but it does hurt Turks. When you were 5 or 6 years old, you learned a lesson that every kid does, and that is when you fight in the sandbox, the one thing you never want to do is make enemies of everybody, because they will gang up on you, and you will always lose no matter how powerful you are. And Trump has made the mistake of thinking that the United States is rich and powerful and we can do everything and anything. And I don't believe that's true. Now, here's why Turkey is so dangerous as opposed to Venezuela or Brazil or Argentina, all of whom have very serious economic issues right now. Turkey owes about $500 billion in external debt. But Erdogan has the ability to default on any or all of it. Now, if he had a selective default, the way Argentina and Brazil does on a regular basis, it wouldn't be any big deal. 5 billion, 10 billion, 20 billion, 50 billion. It's no big deal. Those kind of amounts get defaulted on all the time. But if Erdogan said we're not going to pay a dime of the 500 billion, he will have just taken down the banking system in the world. And we know that's going to happen. There's no surprise. The banking system died in 2008, and it's been on artificial respiration ever since. We should have let the banking system collapse in 2008. We didn't. We pumped a ton of money into it. It appears to be alive, but it's not. It's a zombie. It's a walking death. And when we have our next economic issue, whether it's Venezuela or whether it's Brazil or Argentina or Turkey, there's a good chance of the entire system coming down. When that happens, and it's not a question of if it happens, it's only a question of when it happens, then we're going to have some real problems. What you're saying about kids on vacation all over Europe, when you were saying it, I was thinking, and what exactly are they spending? But there's a simple reason. I'm gonna turn this around. Why don't kids today save? And you and I know intuitively they should. Why don't kids today save?
I don't know. You tell me.
There's no return. It doesn't make economic sense to save. It only makes economic sense to spend. But that's stupid.
You know what? That's it's very true because I see a lot of my friends that have teenager kids, and they show them that, hey, don't put money in a piggy bank. Don't stash it somewhere in your room. I'll show you how to make money with money. So a lot of my friends who are investor parents, they tell their kids, hey, let's go right now. Let's open a bank account, and I'll show you what happens when you put the money in a bank. And they go, they do that. They tell them, hey, I want to deposit $1,000 here. What will I get for it? And the banker tells them what they'll get for it. And then the father asks the son or the girl, would you rather lend this money to me? I'll give you a higher interest rate. And they just show them that if they save money, you can actually make money with it if you do the right thing. But spending it is a bottomless pit. So definitely, it's all about financial education in the end. And if you're really asking me why kids are spending, is because their parents are not telling them otherwise. I do want to cover with you some amazing advancements that are going on in the world today. You know, much of what we used to call the third world isn't such anymore. There's many more countries that are in the middle, what I call today. Then they're not extreme poverty as they used to be in the 70s or in the 80s. Poverty globally has been halved in the past 20 years in terms of what we call extreme poverty. Most people get the basics right now: refrigeration, some sort of schooling, fresh water. Bob, I want to ask you, there's lots to be optimistic about in this world, and are you seeing any positive things that you want to focus on and you want to share with us?
Yeah, if you were in Hawaii, let's say you were on the Big Island or you were on Oahu or you were in Honolulu a week ago, what would your focus be?
Today,
Yeah,
I'm assuming gratitude and looking back on the vacation. But do continue with your angle.
yeah. You would be focused on the upcoming hurricane. Okay. Hawaii just had a Category 4 hurricane. They had some of the greatest flooding they've ever had. Now, when you know a hurricane is coming, do you focus on the hurricane or do you focus on what comes after?
Well, I'm assuming you focus on the hurricane because you want to make sure that you see the world after.
Yes, indeed. What you're saying is absolutely correct. We have a very bright future coming. People are far wealthier today than they were 20 years ago. We drove down to Spain yesterday. We live about 30 miles north of the border. I remember Spain when it was a shithole. Okay. Nobody had cars. There was no money there. There hadn't been a new building built in the country in 50 years. Uh, and it was a terrible place to be. And that's only 30 or 40 years ago. Times have changed tremendously. But one of the things that you need for an economy is it's a monetary system that makes sense. And we live in a monetary system that doesn't make any sense. Now, yes, you need to teach your kids to save money, but the problem is you give them a bank book. Okay, we had a bank book when I was in the sixth grade, and this goes back to 1956, 1958, somewhere in there. And you were required to have a bank book, and you were required to make a deposit every week. And the teacher would show you at the end of the year, okay, you put in $2.32, and you now have $2.50. But the problem is today, you give your kid $100, he puts it in the bank, and he comes back 6 months later, and $100 is turned into 99. And he said, "What do you mean savings? This isn't savings. This is squandering." And that's exactly right. When you have negative interest rates, it doesn't make any sense to save. But all real new businesses are created out of savings. Savings is always a good thing. Spending is almost always a bad thing. You need to save to create a future. When you borrow money, you are spending your future. And we need to teach kids, don't do that. But unfortunately, we're teaching kids, don't save money, spend everything that you've got, borrow every penny that you've got, and that's the future. Well, that's a very dismal future. We need a reset in the financial system, and we're going to get it whether we like it or not. I mean, you just simply cannot spend and spend and spend and spend. You can't spend your way to prosperity. So we are going to have a reset. I think, quite bluntly, I'm scared. I see Turkey and Venezuela and Argentina as very easily bringing the entire system down. I absolutely believe a day is coming very soon when they're going to close the banks. They're going to close the banks because they have to. They're all bankrupt.
Bob, I want to follow up on the previous question. I want to focus on an interview that Charlie Rose conducted with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates about a year and a half ago. And Buffett talked about the fact that the U.S. should grow at about a 2% GDP for the foreseeable future. But for such a developed economy, it would mean about an addition of $70,000 per citizen or per resident, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it, over the course of a lifetime, which is quite a huge amount, obviously. But he also said, and this goes back to what you and I just talked about, is, the world is getting richer, but the concentrated wealth is becoming a problem, a societal problem, where people can become billionaires and 10 billionaires or 100 billionaires, but in the course of doing so, they displace tens of thousands of people because they came up with a brilliant idea that deemed previous vocations worthless. But to retrain these people that are 40 or 50 or 60 and they've had mostly training in one profession, it creates a huge social burden. So Buffett was talking about the fact that capitalism has brought us a lot of blessings, but now it's becoming so specialized that if you don't have a very unique ability to adapt and change, you will become irrelevant to a capitalistic society, and that is a problem that either the free market or governments should consider how to solve. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing that in many developed nations. We're seeing that with the youth, actually, in Southern Europe, where I'm right now, where half of them don't work in some countries. So I want to ask you, first of all, is the idea of a middle class dead in America? And how can misplaced workers whose industry have become less relevant, how can they be able to stay a viable part of society and not a laggard on it?
Well, let me answer the first part. When you ask the question, is the middle class dead in North America? Shivers literally went up and down my back. The middle class is the backbone of every stable society. Now, every society in history has had rich and they've had poor. But these stable societies have a large, prosperous middle class. We're decreasing the middle class, and you just raised part of the issue, but you missed part of the issue too. It's a two-part issue. One is, do you have capitalism or do you have crony capitalism? And in fact, I would argue that what we really have is not capitalism. It's not fair or free enterprise. It's crony capitalism where the laws favor the wealthy. Now, I think the ability of a 15 or 16-year-old kid to look at the internet, to look at computers, to look around him and say, I could create $1 billion industry in 10 years. I think that's wonderful. That has never existed in history. Now, are people going to be displaced? Yes, they are. Okay. If you were making buggy whips in 1905, you had a great business. If you were making buggy whips in 1925, you were bankrupt. And times change. Now, things happen faster and faster and faster. And yes, you need to adapt with times. And it used to be you went to work for a company at 25, you worked for them until you were 65, and then you retired with a solid, stable retirement. Those days are gone. Okay, you have to adapt, you have to change. But crony capitalism means the very wealthy are getting obscenely wealthy, and the middle class is disappearing, and the number of poor is increasing. That is a recipe for a revolution. And I know we're going to tap on it when we talk about Trump. The danger in the United States today is a revolution occurring, and the real reason for it's going to be economic in nature. Guys who went to work for a car company or went to work in the iron business, who went to work for the airlines, who worked for 30 or 40 years and retired with a good retirement, they're seeing their retirements disappear. But I think there's something like 220,000 people working for the government of California who will retire with $1 million retirement plans. Now, the government employees in the United States are being rewarded extremely richly, but the average working stiff in the United States is being screwed. They know they're being screwed, and they're angry. Now, Trump was not elected president because anybody liked Donald Trump. You can look at Trump and realize the guy is a buffoon. However, you could look at Trump and you realize I am not looking at Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was just as crooked as she could be. The FBI, same guy that decided Trump was a crook without interviewing a single person, never even bothered to look at Hillary. We didn't care. She had a home-baked server. It didn't make any difference. Government officials in the United States are literally getting away with murder. The average working stiff in the United States is being taxed higher and higher and higher, and they're angry. Now, that's not going to end well.
And I want to ask you, Bob, you've been around for a long time. You've seen America go through many ups and downs, many times of division and internal strife. Is this normal, or is this does this have a different sense this time around, especially with um, the very noticeable hatred towards Trump by Hollywood and the mainstream media?
Well, that's really spooky to me. Why they hate Trump is just utterly beyond me. And the only thing that I could say is that they're somehow prostitutes working for the military industrial complex. Now, in 1961, Eisenhower warned Americans about the danger of the military industrial complex. And literally everything that's happened in the last 20 years, I mean, we've been at war every day since about, I think, October of 2001. Now, one thing that I'm absolutely adamant about, and I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps and 2 years in Vietnam, and I flew 800 some missions. Wars are very expensive. Wealthy countries don't fight wars. If you fight wars, you're going to become a poor country. Switzerland is a very wealthy country, and it's because they said, look, we don't want to fight stupid wars. The reason, a large reason that Europe appears to be financially better off is they're not squandering all their wealth fighting stupid wars. That everything that's going on in the Middle East, there's really no reason for. Nobody is any better off, and I wish we didn't do that. But the funny thing is, when Obama had been in office for 17 days, the Nobel Committee voted and gave him the Nobel Peace Prize because he had gone 17 days without starting a new war. Now Trump's finding enemies that we never knew we had before. Okay, since when did Turkey become an enemy of the United States? I mean, that's like really weird. And how can you have so many enemies? I mean, how can Russia be the enemy and China be the enemy and Iran be the enemy and Iraq be the enemy and Afghanistan be the enemy and Somalia and Sudan and Libya? I mean, how can all these guys be enemies? What are you doing wrong? And the answer is we're in a economy dominated by the military industrial complex. Now, I was a pilot, and I would tell you categorically the F-35 is the biggest piece of shit aircraft ever designed. But I have seen ads that say that out of 435 congressional districts, that there's work being done in 389 different districts. So what Lockheed has done is they bribed everybody. So we no longer have a real economy. We got a totally fake economy based on borrowed money. And as a result, Russia and China and Iran and now Turkey are looking around saying, what do we need these guys for? And the answer is they don't.
Well, and I want to ask you, Bob, you've gone on record, and I want to switch topics altogether. You've gone on record against cryptocurrencies back in Q4 2017, called them a bubble back then. Is there a value proposition in general right now when they're 70% cheaper, or do you see no value in the idea of a cryptocurrency, of a crypto project, of blockchain technology behind it? Do you see no value in any of this sector, or is this becoming interesting?
Okay, tell me a big city that you're very familiar with. Yeah, give me anything. Any big city you're very familiar with.
Tel Aviv.
Okay, how many people in Tel Aviv?
About 600,000 people.
Oh, okay. So it's not a big city. It's like the size of Miami, Florida. When I was in Vietnam, I transferred from flying F-4s into flying single-engine Cessna spotters. And because I had flown piston engine tail draggers before, they made me the maintenance officer and they made me the instructor pilot. So we got these pilots who had been F4 and A4 and A6 pilots, had been jet jocks, and all of a sudden they had to navigate via maps, pieces of paper. And they didn't know how to do that because everything they had done, they had navigated electronically. So I would take these guys up and I'd say, look, guys, do not make this complicated. Do not look for the river or the city or whatever it is that you want to get to. Look around. Look around the entire 360 degrees and find the biggest natural feature that you can find. And once you find that, it becomes very easy to look at the map, see where the big natural feature is, see where it is on the map, and then you can locate yourself from there. What you need to do when you're looking at an economy is to ask questions about the biggest natural feature. Now, in Tel Aviv, do they have any ice cream parlors?
Yeah, they have many.
Okay, they have many, and that's a good answer. I'm glad you said that. If somebody came to you and said, Bob, there are 2,194 ice cream parlors in Tel Aviv, what would you tell them?
That you better own a very unique one to succeed.
Actually, not. You're going to fail. Okay. Every single one of those ice cream parlors is going to fail, and you're going to have to restart the system. As of today, there are 2,194 cryptocurrencies. Now, first of all, I don't think there's anybody in the world who has any concept of what 50 or 100 of them do. We had the biggest financial bubble in world history that culminated in December of 2017, and I actually did an interview with one of your people, and it was really funny because everybody was making fun of this senile old man who didn't understand modern technologies. You cannot have 2,194 cryptocurrencies, period. That's too many. They have to die. Now, the concept of blockchain, I think, is very interesting. I think there is a future for it, but I think the cryptocurrencies have to die first. I think there were 805 or 817 billion at the very top, and 600 billion has disappeared. The other 200 billion is going to disappear, and then somebody's going to come up with something real of real value. So the answer is eventually there will be something of value. However, it's not there now. And anybody who's in cryptocurrencies today is in worse shape than they were in December of 2017. They just don't know it.
Now, Bob, where do you see value today?
Actually, in resources. Okay. If the world's financial system is totally out of whack, and everybody who ever passed Economics 101 knows that, would you rather be in paper assets or in real assets? And my answer is I would far rather be in real assets. There will be a reset. Land prices are going to go down. Home prices are going to go down. A lot of people are going to lose a lot of wealth. And at the end of the day, yeah, we will be better off.
Now, is there any reason for the bull market in stocks to end anytime in the immediate future? Or do you still see the stock market rallying? And whether or not it's a bubble or not, we can debate. But do you see it ending, or do you see it continuing for the duration of a few more months, even a year and a half?
Does an avalanche start from the top of the mountain or the bottom of the mountain?
And your answer would be?
I mean, to the very best of my knowledge, avalanches start from the top of the mountain. If you're getting into any market, and it's true of gold, it's true of silver, it's true of real estate, it's true of diamonds, it's true of paintings, it's true of the stock market. If you're getting in at the very top of the market, you're taking enormous risk. Now, I think that literally, like yesterday or last week, we had the record high in the U.S. stock markets. I see enormous danger there. And one of the things that when you talk about stock market, you're really not talking about the stock market. The FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Netscape, or Netflix, and Google, are 50% of the trading volume. The actual depth of trading in the stock market is very narrow.
Yeah, that is a huge phenomenon. And I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, you see that at the top. I mean, I see every single indication that there is trouble coming soon. And unfortunately, people have been predicting this for years, including me. But I see enormous danger. It's a very unstable system. It's like driving nitroglycerin in a wagon train. You want to be very careful because one bump and the whole thing blows up. It will be something, it will be a black swan. It will be something that we don't see. It could be as stupid as Trump getting into an argument with Erdogan over a single American preacher. That could bring the entire world's financial system to a screaming halt. It's going to happen. We just don't know when.
Bob, I want to ask you an interesting question. Before 2008, if you can recall, were you concerned? I mean, when did you start becoming concerned about the fiat monetary system? I want to even take you back to the 70s, if I can, and ask you, was this sort of environment where there's a huge fear, a huge movement into what we call gold bugs or real asset enthusiasts and obviously sound economic enthusiasts against what's going on in the U.S. government, or is this intensified as you've seen it when the dot-com bubble burst or when 2008 happened? Kind of talk to me about the history of this progression in fear, because right now, today, there are many people which I don't think they can ever trust a politician or a banker ever again. And I want to understand if this is something that was popular even 20 and 30 years ago, or is this a progression, maybe due to the internet and the amount of information that we have at our disposal today?
Well, you just raised a really interesting question. Governments and the powers that be, such as the Catholic Church, have controlled the narrative literally going back to when the first Bible was printed by Gutenberg in 1423 or 32 or whenever the hell it was. I became aware of resources, especially gold, in 1969. We had a lot of rain and we were sitting around for days and we couldn't do anything, and we would play poker and we would get drunk. And somebody bet me that I could, somebody bet me that I couldn't spend $1 million in a single mission in the F4. And since I was in my cups, and you say stupid things when you're in your cups, I said, oh yeah, piece of cake, I can do that. Next day, he reminded me we had bet $20 or something, or a bottle of booze or something, on whether I had the ability to spend $1 million on one mission. Now, we knew the cost of everything. A pair of sunglasses was $12.51. A gallon of JP4 was 2 cents. A flight suit was $18. A 500-pound bomb was about $500. A 500-pound napalm was about $450. We knew the cost of everything. We didn't care, okay, because the government paid for it. It's not like it came out of our pockets. So the guy came up to me and said, okay, either put up or shut up. And I said, what do you mean put up or shut up? And he said, when we were drunk last night, you said you could spend $1 million on a mission. Really? Did I say that? That's kind of stupid. But yeah, I can. So I went out and flew a 3-hour mission. I came back and I had written down the ordnance on every airplane that I had controlled in that mission. I went out and bombed the crap out of a section of jungle that couldn't shoot back, because you don't want to bomb the crap out of sections of jungle that do shoot back. And I added it up, and it was just over $1 million. And he said, well, how do you do that? I mean, 175 millimeter shell only costs $400, and 500-pound bomb only costs $500. How do you do that? And I said, well, I realized that cluster bomb units cost $65,000 a piece. So I called in, I had troops in the open. I got like 6 flights of cluster bomb units, and I bombed the crap out of the jungle. Nobody shot back at me, which is always a good thing. And here's the list. And he paid me the $20. Now, the point of me saying that is, how much was gold in 1969?
Well, it was pegged, so we know how much it was.
It's $35 an ounce.
Exactly.
Okay, I had just spent the equivalent of about 28,000 ounces of gold bombing an empty piece of ground in the jungle to win a $20 bet. And the problem is, somebody had to pay for all that ordnance. Now, I looked around and I said, we're not paying for this war. There was a 10% income tax surcharge, but there wasn't any increase in taxes. Americans didn't suffer. Americans were doing very well financially. So we had a war and we weren't paying for it. And the really funny thing is, you can look around now, there is not a single tax Americans pay to pay the trillions of dollars we have squandered in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and Somalia and Sudan and Libya and everywhere. We're not paying for this war, but somebody is somewhere at some point in time. Now, I suspect the piper is coming and going to demand to be paid. And all this money that we've borrowed, we have squandered our future, and we've squandered the future of our children and our grandchildren. You just can't keep doing this and not suffering as a result. You're going to.
So, going back to my original question, is there an intensification of this, or has this always been part of society going back to the 70s and onwards? Or because you're seeing a huge movement here, this is not something that goes away. And I'm wondering, and I'm asking you, because you've seen it and experienced this, what is your take on this?
Well, Americans are fools. Americans traditionally trust politicians, and anybody that trusts a politician is a damn fool. Now, you can go anywhere else in the world, and there is a natural tendency to distrust politicians because we know they're crooks, we know they're liars. And what's happened is the control of the narrative has shifted. Okay? The Catholic Church controlled the narrative. They controlled the reality until Martin Luther tapped his 95 complaints on that church door in Germany. I'm not saying the internet is truth, because it absolutely is not truth. But 100% of what you're reading in the mainstream media is fake news. And on the internet, only 75% of what you read is fake news. So people can find some real value on the internet, but they're not going to find it in the New York Times or the Washington Post. So things have changed, and that's wonderful. I mean, to the extent I'm very proud of my website, we give a lot of information to investors for free. That information wasn't available in 1929. Okay, very few wealthy people knew what was going on, but the average guy didn't. So I think the small sites, your site, my site, the tens of thousands of sites operated by a couple of people, do something that's tremendous. And we're going to see some big change. Yes, it is accelerating. The belief in government is decreasing at an enormous rate. Hillary Clinton had a lot to do with it. The FBI had a lot to do with it. I mean, some of the stuff's ridiculous. Comey released the conversation that he had with the President of the United States through a law school buddy, and he doesn't feel like he was doing anything illegal, which is really funny. Comey talks about himself as a patriot, and James Clapper talks about himself as a patriot, and John Brennan talks about himself as a patriot. We're trying to overthrow the democratically elected president of the United States because we don't like him. We're a patriot. I'd love to know where that came from. They changed the definition of patriotism, I suspect.
Bob, let me ask you, where can people check out your work? I love the site. Can you give it out, please, to people? You have a number of sites, and also, are you active on social media?
I don't do social media for 100 different reasons. I'm not saying I'm anti-social media. I'm just anti-social media for me. I would give anything if someone would break Donald Trump's Twitter thumbs. Okay, the idea of conducting international diplomacy on Twitter is simply absurd. Twitter is really handy if you're a 14-year-old. I've got two websites, 321 Gold and 321 Energy. I've written about 5 books. They're all available on Amazon and through Apple. And we deliver real value. I don't cater to the manipulation conspiracy group. I hope that I offend everyone at some point in time. When you're listening to somebody you agree with totally, you're not going to learn anything. You need to listen to people you don't agree with, and you need to figure out, is he right or am I right? And sometimes you need to re-examine your belief systems.
Bob Moriarty, thank you very much for coming on the show, and we'll definitely have you on again, sir. It's always a pleasure.
You ask great questions, and the real key to a good interview is not the guy being interviewed, it's the guy asking questions. The questions are very good, very timely.
Thank you, sir, and enjoy your time in the Sounds of France.
Good deal. Thanks, sir.